just a it's an eye. It's a giant eye with like some nodes in the iris there.
Yeah.
Very straightforward and not very creative with the name either. Planets. Hey,
Planet
did you
Watch.
get your Planets token?
It is not a good name for a cryptocurrency.
Horrible. But this is the kind of stuff they're going to start pushing. Like, oh, if you want to be a company that's on the cutting edge of technology, you want to be in Planets token. No one's going to buy it. The other one we've talked about before, I think this one's a little bit more straightforward. This is UPCO2, the clean crypto, introducing the world's first tradable carbon token. And there's the logo for this one is actually a little hand peace sign. And I think it was actually Titus Frost who commented on a tweet that I sent out. Let me just pull it up here because I think it'll really give it away, explain it a little easier if I just read his tweet. Not the first Algorand being the company here that this carbon coin is based on. Carbon neutral, and so are some others. However, notice the as above, so below Masonic sign of the mysteries. There is a dark symbol and a light symbol of this peace sign of the hand. And then he also posted the photo of Baphomet, holding up that little hand signal.
Mm-hmm.
It's not exactly the same, but it's close enough. And if you look at the history of the peace sign, there's all sorts of esoteric, connections there too.
Yeah, but connected with the Victory Day and the connections with the occult underpinnings of the victory of World War II.
Yeah. So I think given the situation with everything taking place and the infrastructure change and the, hey, whoever uses Bitcoin is bad, all those narratives, it's pushing a worldwide carbon credit tax crypto type of system. And the reason why I brought up the human DNA type of thing is also because I'm bringing this up just because to kind of wrap up the whole cyber segment. There is a author, we've mentioned this author several times. He's known as the father of cybernetics, Norbert Wiener. And he has a book titled God and Golem Inc., a comment on certain points where cybernetics impinges on religion. And the book cover here, the original book cover, is literally the all-seeing eye.
Mm-hmm.
And is that the nuclear? Kind of similar to a nuclear thing. So.
Yeah. It's almost like either a nuclear thing, or it even kind of looks like a film reel.
Reel, yeah. And the whole idea here is that the human being will eventually become sort of the technological commodity, where the robots are sort of the slaves at first. Eventually, we will become a resource to the machines kind of thing. And this was written back in I think the 40s or 50s or something like that. So it's written half a century ago, and they were already on top of it. And so that's part of the agenda. It's not really surprising, but I just thought I'd bring it up because I think it all ties together to this longer agenda that's been going on for quite a while. And now that they have the infrastructure to tear down, to build up this stuff again, just in the same way they did with 9/11, the same way they did with Pearl Harbor, the same, any kind of war. I think we're seeing the same thing being set up here. So
yeah,
just, information to keep everyone apprised and aware of where we're headed and what we're doing in terms of, or not us, but what the world elite are doing and how long it's been planned. It's just it's been part of the agenda for a long time. And speaking of which, let's go into the Wakshin stuff because it ties into the whole war game stuff.
Real quick, for those who are more interested in the occult connections with World War II, just looking at Aleister Crowley and some of the things he was doing on behalf of the UK government, ritual-wise.
Yes.
You start there. It'll fall. You'll make it to the end.
Well, in Age of Deceit 3, I talk about the Macy conference where all these cyberneticians and mathematicians and all these people got together and they did this like big seance.
Yep. Seances.
It's
drum.
not even like hidden. It's like, oh yeah, we did the seance,
the human skin drum,
yeah,
all sorts of weird stuff he was doing.
Okay, so moving into vaccines here.
Vaccine.
A pandemic special.
And let me just run here. I'll do it quickly, Basil, and then we'll get into some of the stories.
Yep.
This is this document. It's been shared around. If you're paying attention, the SPARS pandemic 2025 to 2028, a futuristic scenario for public health risk communicators. And this was the Johns Hopkins Center for Health Security who published this in the year 2017. I think this was what Fauci was talking about when he's in 2017. Remember, he was like, there will be a global pandemic with this presidency. Or whatever
he said Trump will experience a surprise pandemic
or something. Yeah. Yeah. So I think he was reading or part of this event and he was all pumped about it, maybe. Okay. A couple things to point out here for those of you who may not be familiar with this document. It's out there. Again, it was published in 2017. Let me, I have some parts. I can't highlight PDFs, so I have to take notes and then look up the spots here.
Okay.
Generation purpose. The time frame for the scenario, the years 2025 to 2028 was selected first, and then major socioeconomic, demographic, technological, and environmental trends likely to have emerged by that period were identified. Specifically, two dominant trends likely to influence regulatory and public responses to future public health emergencies were selected. 1, varying degrees of access to information technology, and 2, varying levels of fragmentation among populations along social, political, religious, ideological, and cultural lines. A scenario matrix was then constructed illustrating 4 possible worlds shaped by these trends, with consideration given to both constant and unpredictable driving forces. And then they chose 1. What's interesting is they were planning this for 2025 to 2028. It looks like they released it early, 2020, basically. And most of the stuff in this document has already happened. I mean, it's crazy when you read through this thing that it's like, wow, they really just had it planned all the way through here. So the next segment I want to read is from page 43. It's called Lovers and Haters. And so just keep in mind, this is written as a sort of a play, right? I think it's called wargaming, where it's like they're basically playing, they're pretending like it's actually happening. So it's written in that way. So the first paragraph talks about the CoroVax, the coronavirus, a coronavirus vaccination campaign. It says early on in the CoroVax vaccination campaign, anti-vaccination groups began emerging on social media platforms. These groups initially came from 4 primary sources, and then they kind of get into, these different groups here, the Muslims and African Americans and, whatever. With the exception of this last group, none of the anti-vaccination movements were cohesively organized initially, existing primarily in small, isolated pockets across the country. The general anti-vaccination proponents, however, existed as a core national group long before the SPARS pandemic. The SPARS is the name of the theoretical pandemic here, which became COVID-19. Following the 2015 measles outbreak in the US, this group united online. By 2016, they had created several primary Facebook groups and numerous Twitter accounts and began using hashtags like hashtag #NoVaccinesForMe and hashtag #VaccinesKill. The anti-vaccination movement migrated to ZapQ. Remember, this is 2017, okay?
Yeah.
ZapQ, that's like right around the time Q actually came out. The anti-vaccination movement migrated to ZapQ upon its emergence in 2022 due to its ability to combine feeds from across multiple platforms, including real-time text, pictures, and video messages from members, as well as select traditional media posts, such as videos, text, and streaming news feeds on a single interface, blah, blah, blah. Additionally, through ability to control group membership, these groups ensured that they would not expose a pro-vaccine, quote, propaganda from pharmaceutical companies, the federal government, or public health or medical authorities. By 2026, many core members of the anti-vaccine movement obtained their national news almost exclusively from anti-vaccine ZapQ sites. Isn't it interesting how already within this documentation about a pandemic is a internet cyber component that's, just not prophesied necessarily, but like, predicted or considered as part of the problem here.
Yeah.
Last section.
Real quick, just to comment on that, one of the surprising things for me with the Fauci emails, first of all, not a lot of it was surprising. It was almost entirely uninteresting to see that, yes, we've all been right about Fauci the whole time. But there were several times where he and his buddies were sending Zero Hedge articles back and forth to each other. And we're tracking the online criticisms that they were gathering. So, we kind of have this idea in the sort of indie space that, or fringe space, whatever you want to call it, that it's sort of, going under the radar, that, they wouldn't be paying attention to any of this crazy stuff we're talking about it. No, it's the Fauci emails showed that they are very much in tune with sort of the underground online information space.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm glad you brought up Fauci, because in the section, chapter 19, SPARS Aftermath, this whole email release, Fauci leaks, all this kind of stuff. That seems to be part of the agenda as well. Here's what it says on page 66. As the pandemic tapered off, several influential politicians and agency representatives came under fire for sensationalizing the severity of the event for perceived political gain. As with many public health interventions, successful efforts to reduce the impact of the pandemic created the illusion that the event was not nearly as serious as experts suggested it would be.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? That's like exactly kind of what just happened here.
I know. I mean, again, remember, this is a hypothetical report that came out in 2017.
2017, yeah.
And they're just on top of, I mean, it shows how much calculation goes into these things and just how much they expect the public response.
Yeah. They have this theoretical President Archer. President Archer's detractors in the Republican Party seized the opportunity to publicly disparage the president and his administration's response to the pandemic, urging voters to elect, quote, a strong leader with the best interests of the American people at heart. A widespread social media movement led primarily by outspoken parents of affected children, which this document goes into these kids that took the vaccine and vomited, and that video went viral and all this kind of stuff, coupled with widespread distrust of Big Pharma, supported the narrative that the development of SPARS MCM, which is the medical countermeasures, was unnecessary and driven by a few profit-seeking individuals. Conspiracy theories also proliferated across social media, suggesting that the virus had been purposely created and introduced to the population by drug companies, or that it had escaped from a government lab secretly testing bioweapons. And again, the link to this document will be in the show notes at canarycrynewstalk.com. If you read it, it's crazy. It just reads like the exact thing of what we've been living. It's like, oh, okay, they just took this script and, just laid it out in reality. One little section here. As the investigators grew in intensity, several high-ranking officials at the CDC and FDA were forced to step down and withdraw from government in order to, quote, spend more time with their families.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
All the way down. So this is literally just a script.
Oh, it's a complete script.
It's just
unreal.
A full-on script that they followed through this pandemic.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
That is spooky,
and
man.
Look at this, exhausted employees of these agencies. Remember what they said about Fauci?
Yeah, Fauci's just so tired, so exhausted.
Many of whom who worked long 6 or 7 days a week throughout the pandemic simply wanted to put the whole response behind them. Little desire remained on the part of decision makers or those who served in the trenches during the response to rehash the events of the past several years.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's a script. They just wrote out the script in 2017. That is crazy. And they're trying to present it as like, oh, they played this little war game and this is what happened. And, they just knew it would happen.